No, 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 diamonds.
You can play a little louder than that. That's all right, Demi. Do what you were doing. Hey, everybody, it's Norm from the Norm's Rare Guitars Podcast. And as you can see, we're prepared and together just the way we always are, but that's the way we like it. Loose as a goose and a lot of fun, with our friends here. This week, I've got the great Tim Pierce. Tim is one of the most recorded guitar players in the world. If he starts turning red, you won't see it on the podcast, but when you go to the All Guitar Network version of it and you see the visual of it, you'll see that I embarrass him and he turns red when I talk about all the people he's played with. Very beautiful young man. So the great Tim Pierce. Tim has played, I'm going to start naming a few, and I'm going to have to ask Tim to do a few, and this is going to be embarrassing for him, but I'm sorry. But everybody from Michael Jackson to Barbra Streisand to the Goo Goo Dolls to Santana. Who else? Just name.
Seal, Rascal Flatts. I'm doing a record with Edgar Winter right now. You go back to the 90s, and that's when the bulk of it really is. People like Whitney Houston and Tina Turner and Joe Cocker. I did like 4 Joe Cocker records.
Wow.
I used to play with Kenny Loggins. I did like 5 Kenny Loggins records. But more recent stuff, Kelly Clarkson, Rascal Flatts, like I said.
Well, I hope that, with all those, credits, I hope someday you get to play with somebody famous. So.
There's allmusic.com has a list of over 1,000 records I've played on. So,
and I think you played on this old guitar. That's probably the low point in his career.
Well, that needs more recognition. I was very proud of that. That's a fantastic thing.
It's a tune that I wrote kind of after Tom Petty passed away, and it was kind of inspired by that. My son Jordan sang it. Timmy played the guitar on it. There was a lot of 12-string on it, and it was really great. It was, I'm sure. He did that just out of sympathy.
No, you actually made me produce that song. You said to me, "You're producing a song for me. You're producing my song." I said, "Okay, all right."
And then I put the gun down after he said yes. So worked out real good.
Turned out great.
So with all the people that you played with, I want to just ask you about just some of the stories. What's kind of memorable when you did like with Michael Jackson? What did you work on with Michael?
I'm actually doing a video about that right now because. I had done a record called Toy Matinee with Bill Bottrell and Patrick Leonard. And Pat had produced most of Madonna's hits, like 36 singles or whatever, and co-written them. So he wanted to do this prog rock record, and it was called Toy Matinee. And a lot of people really liked that record. And so Bill went on to work with Michael Jackson on the song Black or White, and they needed Michael had a fantasy about, he was really into Motley Crue at that moment, particularly a song called Dr. Feelgood, I believe.
Yeah.
And so I had to come up with a kind of heavy metal fantasy part in the bridge of the song Black or White. And I did, and it stuck. They didn't, with these songs, they go through so many iterations that you never know if your part's going to get kept or replaced because they keep changing stuff.
That was a tune with Paul McCartney, wasn't it?
No, you're thinking of Ebony and Ivory.
Ebony and Ivory, Black or White. I don't know.
Black or White
I'm senile. What can I tell you?
Let's see if I can play it.
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so Michael was really, really nice. He's a controversial figure, but the day I worked with him, he was super nice and super polite and soft-spoken. It was a real pleasure.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, and then, people like Barbra Streisand.
Well, that was recent. I think that was for John Shank. No, that was for Walter Afanasieff. Yeah, John produced some of it, and Walter produced some of it. And he came to my home studio for that. That was actually just a few months ago, the newest record.
So a lot of the time, when you go in the studio, if you're paying for studio time, and especially if you have maybe an orchestra, strings, and you've got a big production thing happening, you can't go in there and just bring in your local buddy and say, well, I hope he gets it right, and like 7 hours later, after you got 25 people standing around that you're paying them all, it's not too cost effective. So they go with guys like Tim Pierce. And Tim, you know how to get a sound in the studio, you know how to play the right part for the right tune. And that's really important, because when you're paying all those expenses, you want to make sure you don't go in there and have all the air come out of the balloon and things fall apart.
It's still that way in some parts of the recording business. I was at Capitol on Monday doing theme park music, and it was a stack of charts. And because I don't really read, my buddies who make that stuff, they gave me the charts in advance, so I studied for a day and a half and went in. And Chad Wackerman read it, sight read it, his brother Bob sight read it. And there are a couple of guys who specialize in that. So when there's sight reading involved, I asked for the music in advance. Luckily, I came up in an era where songs were really, I just played on songs my whole life, really. But even in that situation, people, when they hire me, even in my home studio, really the first half hour is really crucial. You have to win everything in the first half hour. So what I usually try and do is I try and make the chorus sound amazing, so that whoever has come and hired me knows that we got it in the bag, and then we can fill around and do the verses and the bridge. But I always try and make the chorus really blossom in the first 20 minutes or half hour, so that if it's new people especially, so that they are confident that they came to the right place.
Well, that's what sells a tune, is the chorus.
Yeah.
That's the memorable part of the tune.
But that's with overdubs. But it's still, there's no... I try and shave off 5 seconds on every task I do, or 10 seconds. So all my gear's right near me and right around me. And if somebody asks for something, you pretty much have to give it to them immediately.
Well, what's cool also by having a guy like him, he knows what kind of amp and guitar to choose for the tunes. And, he's, a lot of times you have to be in the right register. I mean, if the tune requires something up in the higher register and you're playing something low, it's going to sound muddy and it's not going to be super musical. So you've got to kind of come in hearing this stuff and, just playing the right thing kind of right off the bat.
It's true. It's really orchestration, and it might be 3 guitar parts, it might be 10 guitar parts. These days, the modern approach is to have less guitar parts, maybe even 2. But in any chorus, I might layer a pair of acoustics. I might do something in the middle, and then I'll do something up high. So you have frequencies that you stack. And you're right, you don't want to crowd any particular frequency. And it's good to pick up different guitars, because if you do use the same guitar and the same amp, things tend to load up. They kind of sit on top of each other.
Right.
So you want to separate things.
So you have like an arsenal of stuff that's, everything from baritone guitars to regular guitars and 12 strings and sitars and all kinds of stuff.
Guitars with humbucker pickups, de-armament pickups, single coil pickups, P90s, all kinds of.
All the amps,
all the
Vox amps, Fender amps, Marshall amps, everything, So everything's got its own kind of personality and stuff. And you have to kind of, in a split second, decide what you're going to use that's going to be right for the tune.
You have to interpret people who may not know the language of music, and they're asking for something, and maybe you strike out the first couple of times, so you have to be willing to put your ego aside, and if they want something that sounds melancholy, who knows what that means to them? You just have to find it for them quickly.
Right, and then
trying.
If they want to be like, you're walking out in the forest in the middle of the night, you
or
got
purple,
somebody who's trying to describe something to you that's not musical.
Exactly.
You got to try to pick up on what they're saying and kind of be a psychologist, psychiatrist. And speaking of psychiatrists, I mean, you almost have to be one to be in my store. There's nobody that comes in that's normal. And
that's true.
And you know that as well as anybody. You're one of the family over there. And
one of the weirdos too.
Yeah. No, I mean, but we love the weirdos. The weirdos have supported me my whole life.
Yeah.
So, the guitar that you're playing right now, this is a player grade broadcaster, but it's a really cool old Fender and single coil pickups. So when you pick up a guitar like that, you play a certain way, right?
Well, I might use this for an arpeggio, because it's not that thick, and it's going to sit in a mix kind of up in there, or maybe a 2-note kind of ostinato thing. Ostinato, I make words sound really weird sometimes. Something even simple like that, or something maybe up high. Really simple stuff that's more skinny sounding. With a guitar like this, it would be more skinny sounding. Wouldn't necessarily be country, even though you look at this and it could be country. But country is classic rock now, so that name doesn't even really apply.
Well, Telecaster, you could play almost anything.
Yeah.
I mean, Ted Green was one of the greatest chord melody guys who played it, and all that twangy
you're right,
stuff,
you're right, Yeah, jazz. Yeah, absolutely. It's very
That
versatile.
wasn't jazz, though, because those were the right notes. You got to play the wrong notes if you're going to play jazz. People who study jazz, they just avoid the good notes
I
and
fake
just
jazz.
go all the way to the bad notes.
Yeah.
There you go. There are a couple of those notes were jazz notes.
Anyway.
So with all the sessions that you do, tell us a little bit about, just a few little experiences in the studio that kind of stand out to you that were like memorable.
Well, I got to do a Springsteen record, and he was super nice. And the thing about, his records, he writes 4 records, and they have 40 songs, and they have to choose 10 of them, so it's always really hard. But he was super, super nice. The only thing is, at the end of the 2 days I was there, he thanked me, and he called me Tom. My name's Tim.
Well, yeah, right. Well, Tom Pierce, that's all right. Hey, listen, Bruce is getting to be my age, so I mean, I don't know what I call myself these days, but actually I have a few words for myself, but probably not repeatable right
That's
now.
okay. I don't remember names either. The Goo Goo Dolls, the first thing I did with the Goo Goo Dolls, you know those guys, they're your friends, It was actually their biggest hit. It was called Iris, and I showed up. I got a call. Dean Parks was too tired to play mandolin, so I got a call to go to Record One and play mandolin the next day. And I thought, I'm not going to show up there with a little case and a mandolin. And I had my entire rig delivered there. And I found out later they actually got kind of angry about that because I had all my stuff brought in, amps, cabinets,
You only needed something
pedal
small
boards.
with 8 strings, and you brought the whole thing.
Because I was kind of like, I'm going to see, if this is a major rock band, I'm going to try and do more than just a mandolin part. And I got to do a slide solo that ended up in the middle of the song. And Rob Cavallo was the producer. I ended up working for him for like 15 years solid after that.
Yeah, you do a lot of stuff with Rob.
I do, I do.
Good
just
guy.
did a really great record for a guy named Tuck, who, that's a super
Not Tuck
great...
and Patty,
No,
not those
no.
guys. I remember those guys from back in the day.
So that was something that I found out that they got angry that I brought in all my gear,
Really?
but it served me well because I got to play a rock lead solo in the middle of their biggest song.
Yeah, you just never know when the opportunity arises.
Yeah.
Speaking of Springsteen, one thing that's kind of interesting, I've sold him some guitars years ago, and one guitar I sold him was this really cool Gibson J200 from around 1962, and what was really unusual about it was in factory red. And I had never seen Bruce play that guitar. I see him playing Takaminis and all kinds of stuff live, and I was kind of going, God, I sold him. And I sold him that, and I sold him a 0028 Herringbone Martin, and I was kind of going, man, what did he do with those? Did he realize what he got? Because they were so good. And just recently, a buddy of mine called me and said, hey, did you check out the new Springsteen video? It's called Western Stars. And Bruce is using that J200. So I never knew if he still had it, if he
That's
gave
great.
it away to somebody.
Wow.
It's such a cool guitar, and it's so distinctive looking.
Yeah.
And it really fits this video terrific. It's his new single, and people are really digging it. And I'm glad that he actually realized what he had gotten. Was a spectacular guitar that was ultra, ultra rare.
I did one Tom Petty record. I used to do a very special Christmas. Remember, every Christmas there was a record that came out called A Very Special Christmas. I used to do those. And they did Tom Petty did a Christmas song, Phil Spector style, with Jimmy Iovine. There were like 40 musicians there. And I brought my rack. It was the era where I had the big stereo rack with all the stuff in it. And as the session wore on, Mike Campbell, who was co-producing, got more and more mad at me. People get mad at me a lot. Because he didn't like the sound of my rack. At a certain point, he walked out into the studio. He took the cable out of my rack and plugged it straight into the amp and said, there's your sound.
And did it work out?
He was right, yeah.
There you go.
I think after that, I stopped using the rack pretty much. And I don't even own one anymore.
Kind of sounds good going a guitar right into an amp, without all the stuff in between. One thing that always got me is that, you hear all these guys with these angry bumblebee sounds, these distorted things. And, and distortion's really good in the right spot in the right tune. But, some people, that's all they do is just that overdriven thing. And it just sounds like an angry bumblebee to me. Guitar is such a wonderful sounding instrument that, when you disguise it that way, when you bring it out, it's like an electric sitar. If you played it all night, people would be running for the door. But if you bring it out at the right moment, it's very tasteful and very, very cool.
Yeah, distortion on the guitar really does have a limit, and sometimes you always want more of anything good, so you spend years trying to get more sustain, more distortion, and then you realize it really is just the amp cranked up to the sweet spot, and then maybe a natural sounding pedal in front of it, and that's the best.
The natural distortion.
You can still hear
really
everything. The harmonics, the note, the character of it, but. There was an era where everybody tried to push it as far as they could.
Oh, yeah. Well, they were trying to get that sound at a lower volume, and it was artificial. And in the mix, it's sort of like, I grew up, I used to play B3 a little bit, and, a lot of these synthesizers have kind of a B3 sound. And if you kind of get it just in the right part of the mix and it's not super featured, it can actually sound pretty much like a B3. But if you highlight it on its own, anybody who kind of knows the sound will pick it out and know that, like the guitar sound, if it's like some pedal, that it's some pedal.
Sometimes when I layer sounds, I'll go back and replay the most distorted ones because I realize, that's too distorted. And it always sounds better. Cleaner always sounds better. Maybe that's, an age thing, but to me, cleaner. I like the sweet spot. Like I just like where it begins to distort, compress a little bit. I think everybody does.
And I like some of the muted parts, even like staccato. And one thing in music that I think is highly underrated is arrest. I like music that, is a little bit less than more, So, because for years, everything was more. It was like throw the kitchen sink at them and, show them what you can do. But a lot of times, knowing that the player is capable of doing more, but not necessarily because for the tune, it's not appropriate.
Yeah, I did, I think 3 Rod Stewart records, and the first one I did was with Trevor Horn. I ended up working with Trevor for a long time, too. And he had this quote where it's the best version of the simplest part. Yeah. And I think you're a fan of that.
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
I like simplicity. I always loved Curtis Mayfield.
Yeah.
Because can you do a little of that kind of stuff?
I love that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, so you always wanted him to do more, but he didn't, which was the tasty thing to do. But, now I want people to play less, and they generally don't.
That's because you love songs, and I do too. My love of music comes from 60s top 40 radio, and yours is probably similar, maybe
very similar.
R&B too, for you. But we love songs, and guitar functions it's in this simple way in songs. It can be like percussion or something.
Right. And, I have some friends who are going to do another video and a podcast in a little while. My buddy Freebo and the beautiful Alice Howe.
Yeah, they're all about songs.
Yeah,
I've seen their videos
about
on
songs.
your
Their stuff
channel.
is so tasteful, and they just play the right stuff.
Exactly.
And that's what I dig. Again, maybe it's my age, but I want to hear the Beatles. The thing that was so cool about the Beatles is those tunes are so memorable, and you can hum them, and you want to be able to tell what the tune was after 1 or 2 listens. Kind of be able to that was this or that. So and it was a study in simplicity.
Yeah. Well, you also champion the virtuoso too. So But I think your favorite thing is to hear a beautiful song and a guitar part that functions in a song.
It's great that guys can play the stuff, and in certain instances, it really works to play the busier stuff, and as long as it's tune appropriate. Yeah. So, Freebo always leaves a lot of space with his bass playing, and I like that. Holes are.
Well, that's because he worked with major artists his whole career, and that's what you learn. You learn to be part of the song and orchestrate a part that serves the song.
Absolutely. So just, just a few little anecdotes, little things that you remember of some of the sessions. Could be something funny or whatever that, from many of the sessions or anything that you've done where, that was kind of whacked out,
I don't know. I had I've had a couple of disasters.
Well, who hasn't? Yeah, thank you.
I did the Tonight Show with Aaron Neville, and I left my acoustic guitar plugged in, and the battery died. And so the sound check went great, and I left the guitar plugged in. And it came for showtime, and they run that thing like a tight ship. We got on stage to play. No guitar. And I had this moment, it was like being in a dream. The Tonight Show band was playing, you know, they play in the breaks, right? Well, that break, it seemed like it lasted about 20 minutes. And Aaron Neville looked at me like, I'm going to kill you.
Really? Yeah. Aaron's kind of a pretty scary guy.
Sweet guy. So Vicki Randall went into her dressing room and got me a Parker Fly, which has a piezo in it, put it in my hands, and I played it, and it got the job done. The acoustic job done. And then I also used to do records with Corey Hart from the 80s. Remember Sunglasses at Night?
Yeah, I remember Corey.
So one time he flew me to New York to do one gig, a 45-minute show. Stayed across the street from the venue, which was the World's Fairgrounds.
Right.
And there were vans going to the gig all day long. You can imagine, you know. And I'm thinking, I should hop on one of those vans, you know, and get there early. But no, they had an actual car for me at a specified time. And the guy who drove the car had just moved to America from East India. And he basically got lost. And because I waited till the last minute, I missed the gig.
Uh-oh.
Well, the cell phone was dead. I mean, I couldn't reach anybody.
And, you know, you pay for Tim Pierce and, you know, he's at the airport or something on his way to Honolulu or something.
But I've had so many great sessions where I've been in the room with people that I admired. I got to do several Glen Campbell records before he died, and I got to do the Grammys with him.
Glen was a great guitar player.
Yeah, a great guitar player. That was a dream because my favorite song in the world is Wichita Lineman. That's my favorite record.
What a great tune. And that baritone guitar part on that is spectacular.
And odd stuff like that. Like, I was a big Three Dog Night fan when I was a little kid, and Chuck Negron has come to my house and done his songs, you know. And if you'd have told me that when I was a little, so they're like strange ones, you know.
Yeah.
And Neil Diamond was the first concert I saw, and I've done like his last 3 records, you know, with Don Was.
Yeah.
I work with Don Was a lot.
I know Don too. Don's a good guy.
These days I work with Larry Klein a lot, and he's just such a beautiful producer and musician, such a smart guy. Got something coming up with him in September.
Were you ever so in awe of the artist that you could barely function or anything like that?
I'm trying to think. When you go in, you try and go in as an equal. That's, you know, it's funny. None of us have pictures of our sessions because when you went in the studio with these people, you didn't want to grab a piece of their soul and you didn't want to seem like you were anything but an equal. So you never took pictures. And even with the advent of the cell phone, when it came along, you would kind of not do that because it was like you were taking advantage of the actual kind of artist. So I don't really have any pictures, but that's probably happened to me thousands of times.
So you're probably better off just shutting up and looking stupid than opening your mouth and proving that you're stupid.
And silence can make you seem so much smarter.
There you go. It's what's
really
not said,
thing.
what's left out.
Yeah,
so that's
really
pretty cool. We're going to take a little break, and we're going to come back in a minute and talk to Tim some more. You know, it's fascinating because he's played on so many great records, and I love talking to Tim, and Tim's a buddy, and he hangs around at the store all the time. So we want to take a little commercial break just for 1 sec. We're going to come back. I hope you stick with us. Thank you for listening to the Norm's Rare Guitars podcast and watching it on the All Guitar Network. It's something that's very dear to me, and I love it, and Tim's been an integral part of the All Guitar Network. Thank you for everything that you do for us, and thank you for. He lives 4 blocks from the store, so it's great that we can kind of call him at the last minute and say, "Hey, Tim, what are you doing?"
Yeah,
I don't know.
What are you doing down here?
Yeah, come on over here, man. So anyhow, we'll be back in just a minute with more Tim Pierce. That's why you ask for Tim Pierce when you go in the studio. You know you're going to get something tasteful and really cool. That's nice. Keep doing that, man. I like that. This is my new tune right here. We're just hasn't been written yet. You know. So we're back with Tim Pierce, and we're talking about, studio guitar players, and there's a few guys that we really love around town here. You mentioned him before, Dean Parks. Dean is one of the great guys, played on so many of the Steely Dan records. He's another one who's played with Barbra Streisand, Andrea Bocelli.
Well, I had him on my YouTube channel, and it took me about a year to get him, and because I wanted him to play. He is the acoustic guitar on Eric Clapton's "Change the World." That's Dean, and he brought the guitar that he used on the session, and he played the actual part, and it's him. It's all him. That's a great one.
It's a cool thing here in LA that a lot of people aren't really aware of, the write-off room. You know about that?
Yeah, and he's there every week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's not there every week, but almost every week.
Gotcha.
Last week he was away, and George Deering was in to fill in for him, who's another story too. Another one of the guys who is a go-to guy.
Yeah, he's arguably the top studio guitar player on the West Coast, and has been for a number of years because he's in every movie. He's the first call for every movie. Now it's Andrew Sinowick who is actually coming up underneath him as.
There's always a new regime coming up. I mean, it used to be Tommy Tedesco, who was
he was the guy. Yeah.
And he was he could put any kind of sheet music in front of him, and he could read anything and just here, let me look at that. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and go right into it. And
it's a very,
just play
very high set of skills.
Yeah,
it really is. Very few guitar players can be that versatile and that graceful under pressure.
Yeah. I mean, you have tremendous ears, but if you were a young guitar player coming up and you could play real well, it might behoove you to kind of study music and maybe learn to read and learn to do some of this stuff, because the competition just gets tougher and tougher.
Yeah, and studio work for the most part has changed. If you're in Nashville, you're playing on songs a lot, but out here, there's less song work for studio musicians, because if you're a star, I've got a friend who plays with Charlie Puth, who's like a new, pop star.
Yeah.
And he's not necessarily a studio musician. Jan Asveren is his name. But he's Charlie's guitar player, so he gets the calls and he plays great. So most artists these days have some people around them that they can just text or call to come play guitar. They don't hire a studio specialist as much anymore. So in LA, if you want to be a studio guitar player, it's all about versatility and going to school and sight reading, which is not really where I came from. Luckily, I came up when I could just show up and play stuff on songs and make up my own
You're
parts.
fortunate to have the kind of ear that you can get away with that, but it doesn't work that way for everybody.
No.
And, I don't know if you guys have seen The Wrecking Crew.
I have.
And The Wrecking Crew is such a wonderful movie, and it's about all these guys who were the first call guys, and they would play on everything from Nancy Sinatra to the Beach Boys to, anything that you could think of. They played on probably 70-80% of the records that you heard on the radio was the same backup band with the singers, It could be the Mamas and Papas.
They were that animal. They were basically really highly educated, great players who had great feel, who could play jazz like crazy, most of them. And they could just show up, look at the chart, play the chart, but also play something different or play something new. The chart plus whatever great ideas they could offer. So they actually, that's kind of the way it is now in the studio. And then after their particular era kind of ended, it got more open. And there were all kinds of characters that could go into the studio and play songs. But they were that animal. They were highly educated.
Yeah. And, speaking to Glen Campbell, we were talking to him before. He was actually a part of the Wrecking Crew, not the, everyday guy, but he was a part of it. And I remember when I first came to L.A., I went to see the Glen Campbell TV show. I came out with my band with this guy, Bobby Caldwell.
Oh, yeah.
And
Bobby
actually,
Caldwell,
Little Richard was playing, who was his brother, was our manager. And he was playing on the show. And we got to go backstage with Glenn and Jerry Reed. Do you remember Jerry Reed?
Yeah, of
what
course.
a monster player that guy was.
Monster.
And to hear those two guys, I mean, it was like I thought I died and went to heaven. And I'm not really a country guy, but I like anything that's really good.
Yeah.
And those guys were just burning.
Yeah, it was like
really
Les
cool.
Paul. It was a toy in their hands. They just play anything. It was like nothing, Those guys, it was great.
So if you had to go with, who were the most influential people that in your career that kind of inspired you the most?
Well, luckily, I was born in 58, so I was 12 in 1970, so I was there when Hendrix, burst out. For me, it was Clapton, Billy Gibbons, B.B. King, Johnny Winter, and Jimi Hendrix. And then I fell in love with guitar on all kinds of records. I fell in love with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I fell in love with just the way the guitar functioned in songs.
We just did a show about 2 weeks ago with David Crosby and with Al Jardine from the Beach Boys, Alice Howe and Freebo, who killed it, giving these guys a plug here, but, they're our local family. Jesse Colin Young, Lawrence Druber played, Albert Lee, the great Albert Lee. It was really a great show.
It sure was.
So, it's like, any of these guys, everybody's got something to say. And the thing about music, which was really cool about this show is, you look in the audience, and you could have anybody from any side of the political spectrum that if I started talking to them for a few minutes, and I won't talk political stuff because I don't want to piss anybody off, but everybody was smiling and having a good time because it's music and it's love, and everybody just was having a great time because music is so cool, and it means so much to so many people in their lives. And, you could just see everybody was having a good time. And there were a lot of people, I'm sure, if they started talking politics or other stuff that they wouldn't be agreeing, and there could have been a mass fight in the audience. But because people were playing music, everybody loved it, and everybody was super cool.
And as a musician, you can spend a day with somebody working, and you kind of have a bond for life.
That's right.
And if you go on the road with somebody, that bond even gets bigger, even though if it's like for 2 or 3 months or whatever.
Especially if you're on a tour bus with them, you get to really know them.
Yeah, music really, it's a deeper level of understanding for people. Yeah, it connects people. Yeah.
Well, I got to thank my buddy Tim Pierce. Tim, I love you. You're a family here, and and I love all you guys for listening to this. You put up with our nonsense and my stale sense of humor. My daughter always says, "What'd you go and say that for, Dad?" And my wife says, "Very good." So no matter what I do, I come home and I'm kind of, thrown back into the rank of corporal or private. So I go into my store and I'm kind of the general. But when I walk out of the store, man, it doesn't take long to.
Come on, it's up that way for all of us.
Hey, did you take out the trash? Did you feed the dogs? How about going and walk the dogs? Man, that's the way it is for everybody. It's like I'm a dog lover, and what can I tell you? So I'm humbled. And I'm humbled by all my buddies and friends that come in and do this.
Likewise.
And thank you, Timmy. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening to the video, to the podcast, and watching our stuff at All Guitar Network, which is free, by the way. And there's so much great stuff on the All Guitar Network. I'm so proud of it. You have, how many shows on the All Guitar Network?
Too many to count at this point. We're going to do more, too.
Absolutely. Well, and by the way, let me just say one thing. Tim isn't one of these kind of players who is, doesn't try to share what he knows. You do your, you have a thing, your lesson thing, your master class and all that, and you're willing to show a lot of people what you know. And I've seen a lot of people who, if they see somebody looking at their hands doing something, they kind of turn the other way because they don't want to let their secrets out. You're happy to share that with people.
Well, yeah, and I have my friend Andrew Sinowick. I heard him actually copy me, and he kind of did it better than me. And Andrew's an upcoming guitar player. You'll hear more about him. But you're right. 10 years ago, I decided that I wanted to try and shift over to. I saw some people who were doing big online, sites where they were actually, teaching people online. And so I don't do it in person, but I create video content that people can, access with a membership. I sell a membership, and I have 5 employees, and it's become my kind of new business, and it's allowed me to do sessions with people that I love and not take every session. I used to take every session.
On the road all the time.
And not go on the road, too, yeah. There was a period until 2 years ago, I spent 12 years without a single vacation because I always wanted to be there by the
well, if you're not there, they're going to call the next guy, and if they like him, you'll never get the call again.
Yeah, and now I let it go. I actually want them to use the other guy so that you and I can go have lunch.
There you go. Well, it's always fun having my buddy Tim down here. And, the cool thing is that all these young kids, they have a great place to start now because of people like Tim where they can learn. When I was a kid, you had to go to the library, you had to do this to try to find certain things. And now it's all right there for you, right under your thumb at your computer.
Yeah, my masterclass, I have over 1,000 videos, over 100 hours of lessons and content on my masterclass. So.
Well, and it's really great, and I can almost understand it. I just can't do it, but I can understand most of it, and it's really
it's pretty simple.
I'm grateful for you for simplifying it and making it accessible to everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Tim Pierce at the All Guitar network and the Norm's Rare Guitars podcast. Timmy, can you take us out with something a little bit different than what you were doing, just to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
show your versatility? The great Tim Pierce. Thank you.
No. Diamonds.